substitute now. Good afternoon. We will come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone. We will start with announcements, and I believe Ms. Bergman has a very special one.
Thank you. I want to talk just very shortly. I'm going to introduce somebody. This is my introduction to it. So this academic year is Tom Rutledge's 24th and final year as the head men's cross country and track and field coach of Missouri Southern. He has led the Lions to 8 MIAA cross country championships and 2 indoor track and field championships in the last 12 years. His cross country team has made 11 appearances in the last 13 years in the Division II championships, national championships it is, and they've always finished in the top 20, highlighted by 3 in the top 10 in the last 8 years. For his efforts, Tom has been named the MIAA Cross Country Coach of the Year 3 times, the Indoor Coach of the Year 2 times. He was also honored on 3 separate occasions as the South Central Region Coach of the Year and South Central Region Cross Country Coach of the Year. Tom was also introduced as a member of the MSSU's Athletic Hall of Fame in 2008, and this last January was introduced into the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, along with others such as David Eckstein, Dave Palmero, Tony Richardson, and Mike Sweeney. Rutledge has mentored 4 national champions, 8 cross-country All-Americans, and 55 All-Americans in track and field. He's had numerous student athletes earn academic awards both in the conference and national levels. In the spring of 2000, he coached Tangela Gibbons, a former Missouri Southern national champion in the triple jump, who also made a bid for the U.S. Olympic team. Tom became the head cross-country coach in 1989 when Southern first developed its men's and women's track and cross-country teams. In addition, Tom was critical in the development of the on-campus cross-country course, which has been able to bring 5 national cross-country championships and 7 regional cross-country championships to the city of Joplin. These events have brought thousands of athletes and spectators to Joplin, and annually we host the Southern Stampede, which is one of the largest cross-country meets in the country. Tom is married to Karen, a local State Farm agent, so some of you maybe even know her that way. They have 2 sons, Chad, also a State Farm agent in Utah, and he has a wife and 3 children. And Kyle, a former All-American pole vaulter for Missouri Southern, and his wife and daughter live in Pittsburgh, where he's actually the assistant coach at Pittsburgh State University. I'd like to introduce Tom Rutledge to say a few words before he actually, let's let you know, he's got a flight at 6 o'clock. So, Tom, if you could come up and say a few words, we'd appreciate it.
I've been working here 25 years as of February 28th, so it's time I go. I want to thank Missouri Southern for giving me the opportunity to come. I still feel I could do more, but I've had health issues last year, pulmonary embolism, Parkinson's, you name it, and I can't give 100% anymore. I didn't want to retire, but it's going to have to. I can't give 100%, and that's what I ask my athletes to do, and give everything they have, and I can't do it. It's sad, but it needs to be done. It's time for a young man to step in and take charge. And it was hard at first and very difficult, but we were able to break through, and I got kids to do what I asked them to do. We've been having success for a while, and they made me look very good. I don't consider myself a guru. I've just been at the right place at the right time. I guess the main thing I'm proud of is the Stampede basically generates $200,000 to $250,000 for the city of Joplin each and every year. And people say, well, track and field's not a revenue sport. Well, I don't know how much more revenue you can get. I don't see it. We don't see it here. And then the national championship generates probably another $300,000, and then the regional does quite a bit. So we estimated that we generated almost $1 million for the city of Joplin this year. And that's probably one of the things that we had, because I built a cross-country course when I first got here. Our first Stampede had 39 runners. Now we have over 2,000. And it's an annual event. And my dad once told me, if you can't sell your program or sell your business, you need to get out of business. And so I've been trying very hard to sell my business, because I know some people feel we're not a highlight sport. But track and field is the grandfather of all sports. And in some sectors, it's the only sport, some places in the United States. I've just been very fortunate to have great young men and young ladies. I can't tell you all their names. I estimated we've had 300 of those people in the last, I say, at least 300 in the last 15 years graduate. My graduation rate's about 60, 62%, 65, somewhere in that area. I have doctors, lawyers, teachers, and they've gone on and done great things, and I'm very proud of all of them. They still stay in contact with me. I keep asking them for money. And it's going to come around. Missouri Southern is my home, and I really enjoy it here. My wife and I are settled here, and this is our home. And I love the school, but I still know that there's more that we can do. A lot of people say, you've done all these things. I know I could have done more.
He's sorry about that.
I kick people out of my class.
How good is Father?
You need to see me after class.
I will.
Pat knows that I've always taught, and I enjoy teaching. It keeps me in touch with the students, because not everything involves around athletics. Although, I'd like to challenge the board and tell you that be bold, and we have a long way to go in our athletic department. And it's a proven fact. And we have great instructors, we have great departments on campus, but I work in the athletic department. And I can tell you this, we have a 60% graduation rate in athletics. And yes, we do have that 5% that goes astray, that do the wrong things. But that doesn't count the 90%, 95% that are great individuals. And sometimes we get overshadowed because we are in the public eye. Every day you read Missouri Southern in the newspaper. Every day at night, you see it on TV. What better publicity can you get if it's positive? And so therefore, you may not read some other things that happen at the school, but in athletics, it's there all the time. Don't be afraid to invest in athletics. Colorado State Pueblo built brand new facilities, and in the last 2 years has increased their enrollment 1/3, and it was athletic facilities. And I can sell that. And so therefore I implore you to don't be afraid to invest in it. We've got some things that we need here on campus, and there's a lot of other things we need. And I'm not disrespecting any of the academic programs. It's just that I know, because I've been coaching 40 years. And I tried to, I've kept a clean program. That was one of my goals. I only had to be reported to the Ncaa once. I had to bail some kids out of jail. But they were running on the street, and they got arrested for running on the street. Because I told them not to run on the sidewalk, because Casab called and didn't want them running over his people walking over. And so the police arrested them for running on the street during the snow on a Sunday morning at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I felt it was my fault, because they were just doing what I said and didn't pay attention to policemen. So I've got a lot of stories. But those are just a few things that I can tell you, and this is my opportunity to say, because if you fire me, I'm going to retire anyway. So I wanted to, since I was on the podium, I thought I'd let you know. I enjoy the staff here. I enjoy my bosses. I give them a hard time, probably make them sweat. But you have to also remember this. I tell my athletes this. Success comes from experience, and a lot of the experience comes from failure. And you're going to fail sometimes. But don't be bold. You don't need to be bold to be able to step forward and make the choices. That's what y'all have to do all the time. And I see that. But that's just like a coach. You got to tell your athletes to keep going forward, and don't be afraid to do things. And you have to be bold. I appreciate everything I've done. It's not about me, and I'll play golf and drink beer. Whatever. And I'm not using cuss words either. But I don't want to embarrass Jared or Dr. Speck and anybody else, but I appreciate what y'all done, and I appreciate what you do. Thank you.
the doghouse. I saved my program, and I'd like to submit this into the record today, honoring Coach Rutledge, and I'll give this to you.
Well, they were hard out for finding somebody. They must have ran out of people to choose.
No,
But
very deserving.
I've got two meets. I've got a meet in Redland, California tomorrow, and UNLV on Saturday, and we come back on Monday. I had one ticket this morning if anybody wants to go to Vegas.
You might empty the room then. Thank you, sir, and I assume you're changing status but not going anywhere. You'll be around, right?
On the website, videos on the website that I'm really proud of because my daughter and I put it together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give this to Sharon later.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there other announcements? Okay. This is where I usually do the little shared governance statement in efforts to continue our education and shared understanding of shared governance. Been doing these little statements each month, and today I want to focus on the new permanent shared governance committee that is now in place. Is that right, sir?
Yes, they've been appointed.
As you remember, the board approved this committee as a recommendation from the Shared Governance Task Force, to be distinguished from the committee, that has been leading the efforts on campus ever since 2008, when we had recommendations from the Higher Learning Commission that we needed some improvements. And that task force actually then promoted the formation of this committee, which the administration and board has approved and put into place. And I won't go through all the responsibilities of this committee, even though I have articulated them in the statement, that this will be published electronically, that everyone can read it, and I believe the job description of the committee is also available on the intranet. So I just want to say thanks again to everybody who served on that shared governance task force. There were lots of hours and lots of ideas that came from them, and say thank you to all of those who are agreeing to serve on the new permanent committee. We look forward to their dynamic suggestions for ongoing efforts to improve shared governance at Missouri Southern. And I encourage everyone on campus to learn the membership of this new committee and to provide them with your ideas and support. With that done, no more announcements, and we'll move to the minutes of our February 15th meeting. Board members have had a chance to review those. Are there any additions or corrections? And we need a motion to approve them as written.
I move they be approved.
Mr. Ewing has moved that they be approved as written.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Flyshaker is seconding the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We will move then to Ms. Ice for our treasurer's report.
Thank you and good afternoon. We will review the information from the financial statements for the period ending 2/28 of 2013. We'll look at the cash graph. As we discussed at last month's meeting, the timing differences with regard to the financial aid disbursements have evened themselves out in the February statements. The cash graph reflects a February balance of $19.9 million, and this is actually an increase of $350,000 compared to the prior year. We've gained some ground due to last year we had expended a little over $5 million in construction projects at the same time, so we've gained some ground and show an increase. When we move to the statement of net assets, you can also see where the financial aid has fleshed itself out on the February statements as well. And we have total assets of $129 million. We have total liabilities of $30 million, which includes bonds payable of $26 million. We have a bond payment scheduled for this month, and that'd be a little over $900,000 for that payment for principal and interest. And total net assets at the end of the month are at $99 million. So I move to the next statement, which is the comparative statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net assets. We look at the difference column. Total operating revenues show a decrease of $748,000. Total operating expenses show an increase of about $341,000. In the non-operating revenues, there's federal Pell Grants, and that has a decrease of about $103,000 over the prior year. And I did a little investigating on that, and I spoke to Becca Diskin, who's the financial aid director, and she said that I found that kind of surprising because typically our Pell Grants seem to increase because we have more students that are eligible. And she said a little bit of that has to do with enrollment, but we talked last year about how Pell was going to enact some changes and the maximum lifetime limit for students, and the changes in how they do the EFC has had an impact on students being eligible for this particular aid. And so there is a little bit of decrease there. So it does impact the students, those changes. When you look at the income before the revenues, the current year reflects $8.7 million. The prior year shows an increase of 9.2. So we have a resulting difference between the 2 years of about $400,000, a decrease. Do you have any questions on any of the numbers that I presented?
Do we have any idea on the decrease in Pell? Was that the number of semesters they will cover, and summer, they're not covering summer? Do we have any idea how that's impacting our students, or some of them having to not come anymore, or take out loans?
On both fronts, it actually does. We say there is no summer Pell. There is no Pell that's dedicated to summer. Depending on what the student's liabilities were or when they came in, there may still be funds for that academic year that the student could utilize in the summer. Most of our students utilize them in the fall and spring because those are our larger enrollment times. So most do not have Pell in the summer. It's difficult to say the impact because where they are in that status, and if a student stops out, there is a limit on the number of semesters they can use. Pell is right now, and I'll talk a little bit about the sequester from the federal government in my report. Pell is protected for this year, this coming year, but is not protected after that, and so there may be a variance in some of the amounts, and so we're definitely keeping our eye on that.
It just seems like something that we need to be conscious of, because I was also hearing earlier in the week that there's some trends toward putting those kinds of caps on other funding sources for our students, like only 8 semesters and whatever, regardless of whether they're finished with their degrees. So we'll need to be really conscious of that. Are there any other questions or comments for her? Need a motion to approve her report. Oh, are you finished? No, you're not finished. Moving right along. Back to you. Are you finished?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And we will approve her report.
So moved.
Mr. Fleischaker's moving that we
Second.
approve the treasurer's report. Mr. Anderson has seconded it. No further discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Yost?
Thank you. We'll briefly talk about construction since there's not much going on campus in regards to construction. The IT and physical plant staff are currently wrapping up their renovation project with the Mansion Annex, which will be the ultimate home for university relations and marketing. That project should be complete within a matter of a couple of weeks. The other main announcement you heard a couple of weeks ago probably was that the university will be putting a lion icon on campus, a sculpture in a plaza, which will be in front of this building. This is going to be a tremendous project that will impact this university for a long period of time, I feel. This 10-foot bronze lion will be placed in the middle of the plaza that's going to be in front of this building. So that's thanks to a generous donation from a supporter and with the Student Senate's support as well. But that project will be kicking off here in about 2 or 3 weeks. They're currently wrapping up the construction documents, and those will be on the street next week. And finally, in budget preparation, this is a little bit of a crunch time for Mr. Gibson, so he's surprised he's still here. He still has his hair, which is good, but as we become aware different projections. The budget is fine-tuned on a daily basis, in fact, on an hourly basis. I received 3 documents from him within a matter of a couple hours, and there's a new one, there's a new one, there's a new one. So it constantly is being revised,
We appreciate that he's here and he's smiling, so
so far.
far.
That's because he's not back at his desk.
He's not at his desk looking at all those figures.
Just happy to be here.
Yes. And on the Lion Plaza, we're still raising money for that project, is that right, or?
We're looking at some other opportunities for that.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Yost? Okay, then we'll move to Mr. Bergman.
Thank you. We have told to keep our report short, which I can do that.
Asked to.
I would like to give a report about the MIAA as far as the CEOs had a meeting at the Kansas City basketball tournament. Out of that, there were 4 items that were discussed. First is that the CEOs have agreed to renew the nil media contract for the MIAA television network for the football season of 2013. And from there, they will go to RFP and see what comes out of that. The CEOs also approved the contract extension of the MIAA basketball championship to remain in Kansas City, a municipal auditorium, until the conclusion of the 2015 season. The CEOs notified that the task force assigned to look at MIAA scholarship limitations, they thank them for their service, and they will decide that issue in June. The CEOs will decide that issue in the June meeting. And then the final component of the MIAA CEO council meeting was that the MIAA succession plan was reviewed and will be voted on also in that June meeting. So those are the reports from the MIAA. As far as Ncaa goes, we are looking just to keep you up to date on the ISSG and the Ncaa compliance blueprint review. All the subcommittees have turned in their documentation. They have been reviewed by the athletics department as far as for completion. Obviously, what's within them is up to those subcommittees, and we will work with the subcommittee chairs regarding that. Currently, we have 2 that identify actionable items and action plans that we will be working with. There's more than 2 action plans, but it's 2 sections that stand out. In the next month, the report will be presented to President Speck as per the Ncaa guidelines for review, and then we will go to submission from there. So that's an update on those reports. We have the inaugural Mssu Trivia Night sponsored by Freeman Health Systems on March 28th at 6 p.m. We are looking for additional teams and sponsors. It's an athletic fundraiser event designed for alumni, boosters, and faculty staff exclusively to get to know each other while having fun times and generating some very needed funds for the improvement of the student athlete experience. I do want to thank Governor Rod Anderson and Dr. Buchanan, because they are on a team called the Board of Governors Guessers. But if you have any questions regarding that, please contact the athletic department and we will relay that information to you.
Excuse me, why is it just Dr. Buchanan and Mr. Anderson?
Well, those are the 2 names that he submitted on the form.
Oh.
You're a co-chair. I don't know if you knew that. or
I did not know that.
You're a co-captain, so
So
congratulations,
we'll be
Captain.
expecting other board members to join on.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. It'll be a great time.
It's going to be embarrassing.
This weekend, we have the MSSU Baseball Alumni Weekend. Friday night, we have an alumni social. And then on Saturday, we have a doubleheader versus Truman starting at 1 o'clock. During that, we'll also have the baseball alums and their families at a tailgate. And right now, we have about 40 baseball alums who participate in being there and their families as well. So there could be quite a gathering. We're looking forward to that. And the last item I have is I want to especially thank the Registrar's Office and faculty and instructors at Missouri Southern for their efforts in the reporting of the midterm grades. I'm sure there'll be some discussion, or at least that'll be brought up. But it does allow for our coaches and our staff, as well as advisors, to have a chance to work with the students in the event they are struggling at midterm. And so it's critical as far as the athletic department's perception of it to maintain eligibility and retain our student athletes by knowing early if there is concerns that we can work with them and still perhaps save them for those. So we do appreciate everyone that's involved in that. I know it takes a lot of work on campus from a lot of faculty and secretaries and the Registrar's Office in particular, so we want to thank you for all that. That concludes my report. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Mr. Brueggemann will be helping us later in the meeting because we have a special section on board responsibilities for university athletics that we'll be covering. So thank you for all your hard work putting that together. And we'll be talking about when we're forming the Board of Governors study groups for trivia night. Okay, Ms. Graffin, let's have a report on development. See if you have any surprises for me.
No, I don't think so. You certainly have your written reports, and I too will keep it brief and just touch on a couple of projects. Both are really, I consider, collaborative projects. They truly are. One is, as you may recall from previous meetings where I touched on the fact that our internal newsletter, which is Accents, our campus newsletter, and Staff Senate, we'd been talking internally about needing to change it. It was time to change it, and Staff Senate stepped up and said, kind of pushed that forward and said, we really think it needs an overhaul, and we certainly agreed. So there was a group from University Relations and Marketing, from Athletics, from Staff Senate, from IT. There was a whole group that got together and really worked on it. And so what we did is today we passed out to you just kind of a screenshot. You can't see the whole thing, but there's a before. And if you looked at the before, you had to just scroll down through this whole long list of stories and things, which when that originated was fine, but it grew over time and just didn't work anymore. And then you have the after, which is just the top part. There's more down below, but this is kind of a screenshot that shows you the top part of where it's at now. So if you look at that photo, you can see that there are stories that rotate through. There are columns, there are athletics, there are advertising opportunities. You can see over on the right where we have our Be a Leader, Be a Lion, and featuring the mayor who's a Missouri Southern alum. So all kinds of things now that are included in Accents that we think make it much more user-friendly, easier to read, interesting for people, and so we're just really excited about that, and really thank everybody that participated in making that happen. So, and we did have a glitch there for a while where you couldn't get to it from home. We have fixed that, so it should be fine. If you're still having problems, let us know. So there are always some bugs to work out. Also wanted to touch on a project that's been collaborative with admissions and other folks over in Mr. Fullerton's area of student affairs, and that is working on some admissions materials. So, the process for when students can start receiving things could be a year out from when they actually arrive at campus. So University Relations and Marketing worked very closely with admissions to create a number of materials so that once they start getting that pipeline, we'll continue to get information so that they know and can be prepared for when they are students and when they arrive. Some additions include a congratulatory piece from Dr. Spag as president, another piece that is a survival guide, so things that they need to know, as they're coming into Missouri Southern, and an athletics piece so they can start getting engaged in that. So just a variety of things to help them feel connected and welcome even before they arrive on campus. So those were a couple things I wanted to touch on. Certainly many other things in your report, and happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. No more from you tomorrow.
Yes.
Dr. LaTourette, report from Academic Affairs.
Okay, I recently went to Columbia to the Missouri Course Redesign Initiative Workshop, and as you all are aware, several schools in the state chose a course to redesign. The idea being, is there a way that we could, and Mike reports on this ivory sheet of paper, I think it's ivory. Is there a way that we could have comparable outcomes and spend less money? And so what we did this time was they presented their results. So there were 10 schools, including Missouri Southern, and tomorrow Shayna and Kelly Larson, Shayna Slavings, Kelly Larson, who oversaw the Communications 100 redesign, they're actually going to present what they presented up in Columbia, which will show comparing the traditional approach to the redesigned approach. One of the things that became apparent initially when all the schools started this, they projected what they thought they were going to save, traditional versus redesigned. And one of the things that was across the board, all schools stood up and said, well, we over-projected our savings. And so I think that the idea is it's a win if you have comparable outcomes and save some money. Some of them, including us, over-predicted what we would save. So it's going to be interesting to see the actual savings versus the projected savings. But you'll be able to see tomorrow how that all turned out. And then the Southern Annual Fund is going on, and one of the things we did early on as a faculty is we decided that we would kind of use the United Way model, which the way we've always done United Way, our model is to have departments kind of be teams. And so we made a competition out of it, and we selected folks from every department to be their team captain, leader, and what has happened is the faculty are about done. I think we only got 2 or 3 departments that haven't turned their stuff in. And talked to Mike Fontana. He said the percentage of participation has like 5 times the number. And so that's going to be big. As I understand, we have to report what percentage of our employees participate in the annual fund, give to the annual fund. So that number is going to go way up, at least on the faculty side. So we're excited about that. That worked. We are going to give a lunch at Gusano. You got to give them something, you know. So the team that has the most per person contribution is going to get lunch at Gusano. They also in April 4th through the 9th, the the North Central Association Higher Learning Commission (HLC) will have their annual meeting, and we will be going to that. We'll have a team going up to Chicago and preparing for our next comprehensive evaluation, which is scheduled for 2017-18. And then something new for us, the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships, I don't know exactly, NACEP, I guess, and the Missouri Department of Higher Education. They're having an accreditation institute on March 21st, the Thursday of spring break. Julie Wingert and I will go to Jeff City. Julie's our Director of Academic Outreach, and what we want to do as we try to improve and increase our dual credit offerings, we want to seek accreditation. There's only 3 schools in the state that actually have the accredited program, so we want to be able to say that we have an accredited dual credit program. Then we also have a couple new hires that you'll see there. We have a new assistant professor in social science, geography, Dr. Charles Yeager, and assistant professor in French, Dr. Karen Turman. Dr. John Knapp has announced that he will be retiring. He was a professor in chemical and physical sciences. And Garrett Ray from mathematics has turned in his resignation. So that's my report. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes?
You said you went to, it says, a Missouri course redesign. In that redesign, do they talk I use the word blended, but I think you use the word hybrid. Do they talk much about using hybrid courses more in higher education?
That's really, all of the redesigns, that's how they've done it. They've gone from a traditional face-to-face to some type of hybrid blended, and basically means that a portion of it is done online. And again, ours had a portion went online. Every one of them had something that they're doing a component online. So I think they intermixed the word blended and hybrid. Yeah.
And did we have to upgrade some IT things? Is that part of the reason our costs were?
Actually, we aren't even adding that into the costs. Their projected costs are strictly looking at personnel. So our savings came from, instead of spending money on adjunct faculty, we spent it on learning assistants, which are students. And so really we looked at the savings that way versus equipment.
Is this an ongoing thing where they'll continue to look and determine whether additional changes should be made? Or?
And the idea is that certainly if they're not working, can we make them work? And if they are working, are there other schools that as we watched them, is there something that we could do? And as example, I was very interested in the human anatomy. They redesigned human anatomy at Central Missouri, and I thought, gosh, that would be great because that's a huge waiting list here. Maybe there's something we can do to handle more students. Well, as you listen to it, it's totally graduate assistants. They are basically replacing faculty with graduate assistants in anatomy, and they said 2 things. One, the quality went down, and so, obviously we don't have graduate assistants, so that model won't work for us. But the idea is, and I think Shauna has gone to 2 schools, I know Southeast Missouri State, and presented ours. So Southeast Missouri State is thinking, would this be something we want to adopt? So yeah, I think that there's 2 things here. One is somebody doing something that we could do, and 2 is if it's working, is there something else on our campus that would work? So yeah, it's constantly, but on the same token, many of them said, obviously the idea is there problems? You can't just expect everything to start out and be perfect, and so they're addressing those as they go. So.
I have one more question, Dr. Spear. I'm wanting you to get the financial side first. We see a lot of information presented on keeping costs down. If we also see information throughout the United States and other places about improving student learning outcomes. Was that mentioned at all in this Missouri course redesign?
In fact, one of the things they have to present is, let's look at traditional versus redesign. They looked at 2 things, cost, savings, and outcomes. And so the outcomes can be measured in a variety of ways, either the final exam score, the final grades, the pre-post-test scores. So, but yes, learning, and that's what I was saying, if the learning outcomes go down, I don't know that the savings can be justified. So,
Any other questions?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for reorganizing this Southern Annual Fund campaign and all the participation that the faculty evidently has increased in that program, because that is a big benefit to a lot of students. So I'd like to thank you all for that.
you know me, Rod, I like teams.
She's been fabulous.
And it takes team members to carry that out, so that you got
Yeah.
that. That's good.
They did a great job.
They did, they really did, and we really appreciate that, which I saw in my written portion of my report, so really.
And even to the point where I think what we're going to do is, because the faculty came up with this, is that, we have students in our own department that if they were not receiving some of these scholarships through the foundation, they wouldn't be here. And so they want to do some quick video testimonies of, gosh, if it wasn't for this scholarship, I wouldn't be here. And they said, boy, it's really hard when you show that little video clip for a faculty member not to say, here's my money, So anyway, there's a lot of ideas that were generated. So yeah, it was great.
Well, we'll look forward to additional discussion about course redesign tomorrow morning. So thank you. Mr. Fullerton, Student Affairs and Enrollment Management.
We will definitely keep ours very short. The main thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the first page of my report. We've all been following the information on the federal sequester. And again, just to point out some things where this will impact our students. Again, loan rates are going up, even though those are very small percentages. When you look at the dollar amounts that the students may have, that is still significant. Our supplemental education opportunity grants and the federal work study funds will see that 5%, approximately 5% cut. When you look at the dollar amounts, those are not necessarily significant, or many people don't think they're significant. Just under 12,000 on the SEOG, 6779 for the federal work study. The work study hours equate to almost 950 hours, student hours. And so again, when you look at it, small dollar amounts, but then we have the dilemma of, does a department not get a student because we don't have the work study, or is that an increase to the budget for student help that the university has to pay for? The TEACH grant, which is a grant that basically covers the tuition for people going into teaching field in target areas, math, science, special education, predominantly in low-income schools. And so again, that will be removed from our offerings. Our TRIO programs, the Upward Bound Talent Search and Project Stay Student Support Services, they will all see about a 5% reduction, which could be up to $15,000 to $18,000 per budget out of their budgets for next year. And so we'll be looking at how we'll maintain those reductions. Tuition assistance, the Army, Marines, Coast Guard have already announced. Air Force, it is anticipated will announce, as will the Navy this week, that they are not allowing any new tuition assistance. And so you can see at the bottom, these were the dollar amounts for summer, fall, and spring for our students. And so our students received about $87,000 $87.5 in tuition assistance payments. The students that are in the pipeline right now, with the way that the legislation is coming out, if the military decides to, they will still honor the people in the pipeline. No new students will be allocated. And so all of the soldiers that are returning will not be eligible for that tuition assistance unless something changes at this point. So even though many of these are small dollar amounts individually, when you add them up, they are a significant impact to the university and to our students. Questions on the sequester information? The only other thing, and when Dr. Buchanan gets to the student rep could not be here today, but they wanted me to pass on thank you to all of the students, faculty, and staff that participated in St. Baldrick's this week. We had approximately 32 people that shaved their heads for children's cancer research. Dr. Dworkin. The Senate has raised approximately $6,500 of that, and I'm proud to say that Dr. Dworkin raised over half of that amount with her efforts. And so we're greatly appreciative of Dr. Dworkin and the faculty and staff and students that supported her and the other folks in that effort. So we had ages ranging from a 3-year-old that had his head shaved all the way up to some of our seasoned veterans. And so we are greatly appreciative of that, and it was a tremendous event. So we appreciate all of the student help and the faculty staff help for that event. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move into the Faculty Senate President, Dr. Hand.
Well, first, I don't want to scare you about your trivia team, but we have Charlie Nodler on our team, and we have matching shirts. So, just saying. Dr. Dworkin and I went to the Missouri Association of Faculty Senate meeting in Jefferson City. In the morning, we were doing lobbying, and so I gave Dr. Buchanan a copy of the brochure that we passed out, and she and I went to see Ron Richard, and we got our picture taken with him. Oh, here it is. But it's signed personally, so I can't pass it around, because it's so special. But we talked to him for a while, and then he told us to be sure to go see the Senate in action. So we did some other errands, and then we went there, and we just happened to sit by our representative, Charlie Davis. So we talked to him for a while. But he got tired of us because I kept saying, now it's happening, now it's happening, now, because I never seen anything like it in my life, so it was amazing. One of the things that other Senate presidents talked about were the raises that they got at their schools. And lots of them mentioned that when they got raises, they would be like 1% or $600, whichever is greater. So I was wondering if maybe you all would think about that if there were raises, so that the people, like the staff, who really need the raise more than other people would benefit more. So you might keep that in mind. In the Senate meeting this week, we talked about shared governance some more, because we just love talking about that. And then I sent out the Faculty Senate survey on Tuesday. As of today, which is less than 48 hours after I sent it out, more than 40% of the faculty have already responded to it. And the last thing I want to say is, like students on campus, we are also ready for spring break, so we're counting the minutes. That's my report.
Questions for Dr. Hand?
I have a question for Dr. Hand.
Yes?
And to make sure we get it right, and that I get it right, I've got it, I'm gonna read it here. And I've given a copy out to Dr. Hand, and gave a copy to Dr. Lapierre, and gave a copy to Sharon. And this is a question for the Faculty Senate, so I know you won't be able to answer it today. What does the Faculty Senate believe their role should be in improving student learning outcomes? That's it. I would be interested in a reply. Thank you.
Anything else for Dr. Hand? Okay, then we'll move to the Staff Senate President, Ms. Arwood.
Okay, the Staff Senate meeting took place yesterday morning. I'm happy to report that over the last couple of months, we've seen a consistent increase in the number of staff members attending, which is quite encouraging. We opted not to invite a guest speaker to yesterday's meeting, primarily because we knew a good deal of discussion could be taking place related to our prioritized program list that we're working on, and we wanted to allow ample time for discussion. The top projects were identified, and planning in its very earliest of stages is in progress, and the ad hoc committees are being finalized for those. A proposal to restructure the current Senate makeup was brought forward by the Elections Committee. It was felt that equal representation could be better obtained by consolidating the 3 current categories of staff into just 2. We unanimously approved the proposal with the full endorsement of the 3 current physical plant representatives. As a result, the physical plant category will be incorporated into the classified staff category and no longer be a separate Senate group. Based on sheer numbers, this could actually give them a greater representation on the Senate. The final item I wanted to share relates to the commitment the staff senators show MSSU. At every meeting, we take time to share information on the various committees' work that's done outside of the Senate committees, and the level of participation, the variety of scope, and the dedication our senators show is remarkable. That concludes my report.
Questions or comments for Ms. Allred? I think that committee sharing is essential, and then I presume you're also emphasizing that they take it and go back to wherever they came from on campus and communicate back.
We actually have a couple ideas for some additional communication in place. We're still working out some final details, so we're looking at even expanding it further.
Good.
We're not quite there yet.
Thank you. Were there any board committee meetings? I wasn't aware of any, okay. Dr. Speck, we'll have your report, please.
My comments that were included with the board packet. I lamented Sharon's absence from the office for over a week. Her time away from the office was a fresh reminder of how significant a role our secretarial staff plays in the day-to-day operation of the university. I know that a national day celebrates secretaries, but I personally thank the secretary staff across campus for the work they do to keep us going. Thank you for your dedication to Southern. I appreciate all of you. To keep my report brief, I will only mention legislation that pertains to higher education. SB 437 is a higher education funding model that resulted from the hearings last fall. I gave testimony on behalf of MSSU at the hearing in Rolla. The funding model being proposed bases performance funding on 10% of the university-based appropriations. HJR 14 and SJR 3 address a bonding issue that includes higher education. At present, no new construction would be allowed under a bonding issue. 10% of the amount a university would receive would have to be provided by the university, and the bonding issue will be placed on a ballot in November for the citizens of Missouri to decide. Regarding state scholarships for higher education, A+, Bright Flight, and Access Missouri, legislation that would reduce Access Missouri from a maximum of 10 semesters to 8 semesters is being proposed. In terms of the budget, it appears that the House and Senate are not favorable to the governor's proposal to include 300,000 more Missourians on Medicaid. The governor's budget assumed that the proposal to add 300,000 uninsured Missourians would pass, and thus the allocation to higher education was predicated on funds that be available to the state from the federal government for Medicaid expansion. We're still far away from what legislation ultimately passes and is forwarded to the governor's desk. We'll probably not know the final figure for higher education appropriations until June. That's my report.
Questions or comments? I think there's one more legislative issue that if they do the tax code revisions they're talking about on income, that could result in a loss of revenues of $400 to $600 million, according to this morning's newspaper, which would definitely affect higher education appropriations. So I saw a memo from Dr. Russell.
Yep. And hot off the press.
Looking at that.
Yeah, that's another issue. Hot off the press is the, when you talk about veterans, I think they're taking 0.5% to 1% of higher education budget to provide scholarships for veterans.
Couple options. One is looking at that percentage. The other is to set up a separate lottery fund that would actually fund the veterans proposal.
What about, you made me think a little bit, what about our Missouri Gold program that we're trying to get off the ground?
I spoke to Captain Self yesterday about that. Right now, because those are state funds and coming from the Missouri National Guard, the federal sequester has not had an impact on that. She is watching that very closely to make sure that, but at this point, we have not seen an impact of gold.
So perhaps tomorrow when we're talking about budget priorities, we can weave in some more discussion about some of the actions in the legislature and whether we need to be doing anything. Because it's not looking very bright at this point.
No, it's not looking.
From any
Very
of these
bleak, frankly.
directions. Okay.
Thank you.
Was there any old business? Under new business, let's see, Dr. LaPira, I don't believe you're bringing forward anything. Because of ongoing efforts to, I believe strongly that a big part of our success with shared governance is going to be continued education about various entities and roles and responsibilities. And from the board's perspective of sort of a self-analysis of some of these things, we've asked Mr. Brueggemann and Dr. Speck to start with us today in sort of reviewing board responsibilities in university athletics. And then I want to follow through with that in subsequent board meetings. I don't know if you got my email today. I'd like in April for us to focus on board responsibilities in academic affairs, and then perhaps in June, maybe fiscal. So just sort of a general overview for us so we can self-assess, are we doing due diligence in all of these areas as board members? So with that said, I'll give the floor to Mr. Brueggemann to lead us through some of this.
Thank you. There were 2 articles that were kind of originally referenced. There's actually 3 that exist out there regarding that, and we do have some copies available, and around here everybody should have those. One was originally started back quite a while ago, and initially, and that one's not relevant at this point, but in 2009. But since then, they've had the AGB, the Association of Governing Boards, had actually published in 2012 something called Trust, Accountability, and Integrity, Board Responsibilities for Intercollegiate Athletics. And there's actually a summary article of that came out in the, I'm not sure of the name of the actual,
Trustee.
Trustee, thank you. I have a copy of that as well. It's November, December of 2012 is when that came out. These were, I was going to kind of summarize a little bit about the issues there, and then I was going to approach it from how we are tied in directly with that, and then open it up for some questions or dialogue regarding maybe the way that it's going in the future. So initially, with those magazines, I want to first thank Governor Anderson. He's the one that first brought up these articles, which I found very interesting to read. They include current practices that exist within the NCAA or NAIA. They also talk extensively about the surveys of the membership, whether it's NCAA membership, NAIA membership, or the actual Board of Governors or whatever board they would have inside of that. It had a focus on such areas. This is not all the areas. There's a pretty extensive list, but I thought I would hit a few of them regarding the athletics department functions as a general oversight of responsibilities, presidential leadership, fiscal responsibility, communication, NCAA compliance, review of personnel contracts for highly compensated staff. Really, when you start, what they're talking about there in most cases are those, you'll see coaches that particularly say Coach Saban, his salary is about $5.4 million annually. Those are obviously things they feel that the board should have some relations with reviewing those contracts. Academic success, student-athlete well-being, collectively student-athlete well-being, mission and conference affiliation, which obviously is a large thing going on in Division I and somewhat in Division II right now, even with the formation of this, say with the Catholic schools are pulling from different leagues and creating their own, and you see this continually shifting, even with the case of Mssu going to the SEC, which geographically is not a great fit, but obviously there's some reasons revolving around it. So that's just a few of the areas that are focused on in these articles. There's much more beyond that, but I thought these would be the ones. So let me try to address some of the excellent information available in there. First off, there's much discussion regarding the governance structure of the athletics department, the board of governors' responsibilities, and the integration of the athletics department into the university, not as a extracurricular, but really it's considered a co-curricular, not just because some of the coaches are faculty, but also because the way it intertwines with them being student athletes. So it's really more of, I think historically people have thought about it as an extracurricular activity, but it's not extra. It's part of the actual process of what goes on a campus. And ways that we can show that. First off, as the athletic director, I am a representative on President's Council. This allows for a more immediate response and improved communication with senior administration on campus, whether it's Joanne or Patty or Pat or any of those folks like that. So this is not, by the way, the case always in higher ed. It's not necessarily the way it is on every campus. The AD reports directly to the president as the immediate supervisor, so I report directly to President Speck. That is clearly stated as one of the Ncaa aspirations for any institution, is that the athletic director report directly to the president due to the high-profile nature of what goes on in those areas. As a member of President's Council, I'm designated to give update reports to the Board of Governors, which I'm very appreciative to be able to sit at these meetings. That was not always the case, and able to report the information so you're up to date on what we have going on there. These happenings include things such as team success, which is what is in the newspaper most often, but more importantly, the staffing changes we have, student athlete well-being issues, academic success, community engagement, conference alignment changes, conference and Ncaa legislation, which I always go over any Ncaa legislation or any MIAA legislation changes. Those are great examples of the communication that we would have with the board. In addition, across campus, the athletics department personnel are actively working in many groups, whether it's CAB, Housing, Dean of Students, Academic Affairs, HR, Business Affairs, the IAC, which is a subcommittee of the Faculty Senate, the PEP, the Marching Band, the Alumni Association, and many, many campus committees. So we're integrated fairly well into the campus community that way. Off the campus, we're engaged with the community with boosters, corporate sponsors, local civic organizations, Kiwanis, Rotary, what have you with that, Elks Club, community boards, we're members of different community boards. I'm a member of Joplin Sports Authority and things like that. We also have local government liaisons. In some cases, we work directly with whether it's Parks and Rec or any of those type of agencies. So when we go to those, for example, when I represent Missouri Southern at the Joplin Sports Authority meeting, I'm not representing just the athletics department. I actually represent Missouri Southern and Missouri Southern's interests. So it's not just when there's a discussion about can they use athletic facilities for when we host something, it's really a discussion about what can we do as Missouri Southern to assist with the Joplin Sports Authority and the greater community, which is why we integrate a lot of that when we do have an event. It may involve having stuff in Billingsley. Even though that's a Joplin Sports Authority, we represented it, we transfer that information on and help those relationships grow. The Ncaa compliance blueprint, I've talked about that as I do every board meeting when we have that, is going to be taking place in, actually it's going to be, I have the date, I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow, but it's due technically on June 3rd. That's an outside entity that's hired and managed by the Ncaa to review all aspects of the Ncaa compliance, and they will give us a full report on our success and maybe failures. So that will be presented to the board after we get that report. That will be provided in full to the board. The final, I guess, point related to all of this information in here, which I think really ties it all together, and I found it very interesting, is we have something called the ISSG. I've been talking about that actually at this board meeting for it's been actually 2 years. Originally, we were scheduled to do that in 2011, starting 11-12. After the tornado, we deferred that for a year with a waiver to the Ncaa because we had a lot bigger things on our plate than concerned about the ISSG at that point. So we deferred that for a year. We were actually in process of that this year. We have been. We started in October. Actually, we started before then, but that's when we first had our first meetings were in October. And since then, the report will be due. That's what I just talked about earlier. What I found in that, as the responsible for returning that report into the president, and then from there going to the Ncaa, it covers a lot of different aspects. Half of the report is Ncaa compliance, which also is going to be covered by the blueprint. They're separate deals. The strategic initiative, which is the other half of the report, is what really I thought tied directly to these. Matter of fact, there's got to be a correlation some way, shape, or form behind the scenes that we're not aware of. And what they talk about in the strategic initiative is the philosophy statement of the athletics department and philosophy statement of the university. In addition, it talks about institutional control and responsibility, talks about athletic operations. These are each subsection. Student athlete well-being, health and safety, life in the balance and overall educational experience, and then cultural diversity and gender equity. And once you dig into those reports, you'll begin to see what I'm talking about as far as how it relates to these. This report, which is near completion, included the chairs for these subcommittees to be other folks on campus. It's not run by the athletics department. We manage the process, but we don't control the reports. The chairs were some of these folks. The Dean of Students, which is Dr. Ron Mitchell. The Director of Financial Aid was a chair. The Bursar was a chair of another committee. The University President was a chair of a committee. The Registrar was a chair of a committee. The Treasurer, Lynn, you were a chair of a committee, right?
Yes.
How did it go for you? Great?
Great. Very good team.
And there was many more chairs as well. So those are just some examples of those areas and the folks that chaired them. This report, which I said is due on June 3rd, is indicative of the intentions of the Ncaa, which in most cases parallels the message from the articles, I should say. Having reviewed the initial report, it simply asks yes or no on many of these things that are brought up here. It says, do you or do you not? And if you say yes, great, prove it. You have to turn something in to prove it. If you say no, they say, how are you going to get there? That you have to come up with an action plan. And having dug into those reports extensively, it does point to many of these things. I give you at each board meeting the process of where we're at in that report. At the end of this, we're going to see what we need to do to enhance as far as the athletics department in relation to the overall university and how it ties into that. And in that process, it's every 5 years to the Ncaa. So we'll finish the report. They'll give us 5 years to basically apply an action plan to get to where it is. And I imagine, much like it has since the last report, which was due, actually, it was 6 years ago because of the deferred time, there's going to be new interest of the direction of the athletics and how it integrates to the university. So, because this report is much different than the one that I looked at from the previous ISSG. So it tells you that it's developing and changing on a constant basis. So in conclusion, then we'll talk some more here. I want to thank the board for allowing me to present on such an important topic as this. It's important not just to myself as the athletic director, but to the coaches and to the student athletes of the entire university overall. The value that athletics can bring to a campus as a marketing tool, which I think Cassie would indicate we have a great relationship working with them. As a community engagement mechanism, getting people to campus for events, diversity opportunities for our students. A majority or a large portion of diversity on campus, particularly with demographics, come from student athletes. And also we have tendency to bring athletes in from more around the nation, not as much as regional. Alumni relations and the things that we tie, an example even this weekend with the baseball. Academic success, we graduated at a rate about 16% higher than the average students on campus. And retention, which is a big part of that process. Also, you can't deny it, entertainment is part of what we do. Part of what goes on is an entertainment aspect. And it's not just for the community, but also for students, other students on campus, to get that entertainment value of a homecoming event, the parade, and then all the things that partake with that. So, the athletics department and I, as the athletics director, are dedicated to the success and transparency of the communication with the Ncaa, the community of Southwest Missouri, the MIAA, Missouri Southern, our student athletes, President's Council, President Speck, and the Board of Governors. So I would say in closing, at least from what I've reviewed for the notes here, I'm very interested to see when we finish this ISSG, how it correlates directly with this and when that time comes, which will be in June, or I guess the next board meeting once we get the finalized report, it'll be very interesting to see how we correlate with this, because they really do go hand in hand. It's almost in a sense I'd say there's some deferment that occurs until we get this report completed. That kind of is my notes.
This is your first report too, since coming here.
My first ISSG, absolutely, and I have done one.
This is your blueprint, really.
Right, I did work with it in Division One's got a similar one. It's not called the ISSG, but it's identical, almost in every way, the way it's handled. And I did work on that. That's a 2-year process, though. It's not a 1 year. You can get this done in 1 year. The Division I takes 2 years, but.
The more information you present to us, the more information you give us, it demonstrates the wide web of activity and governance that the athletic department really has within a campus, whether it be us or whatever. It's just amazing what it touches.
Right, I mean, we have a lot of issues, we deal a lot with Darren's areas, and whether it's CAB or whether it's, financial aid. We're heavily engaged in the financial aid. When we have financial aid discussions, it's the impacts of the adjustments. It's not a standalone, contrary to the way people think it might be. It's just out there doing its own thing. It has to be integrated, otherwise it doesn't work.
I sat on an airplane recently with an ophthalmologist from San Francisco, and we just were chatting casually about the challenges of universities and financial challenges. And so he asked me, well, why don't, do you spend money on athletics? And yes, part of our budget. Well, if you just eliminated campus athletics, wouldn't that solve all your financial woes? And I think that can be a common thought process, a too common thought process. So very interested in what you said about that athletics are not something ancillary or separate from the university experience. They are a part of, and that mindset needs to be preeminent. And as a board, we need to not just say, go to a few basketball games and assume that athletics are just kind of out there. So that integration of this into the entire university experience is what we need to keep aiming for, I think. So I won't tell you what my answer to the ophthalmologist was.
Well, I see a large facet of athletics, good, bad, or indifferent, is its fundraising mechanism. This is how universities are really raising the so-called big bucks, and whether it's right or wrong, it is. And that's another importance that athletics is going to pose, and what we do with the product we have. And that's where I see with this circus fiasco with funding at Jeff City that this is becoming more and more important.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
One, let me preface my question and comment by saying sometimes we get a lot of information, and at least one of us is memory challenged. In trying to remember all the information we get. And I'm looking at some of the things here, and like it talks about the athletic department mission, and also in the handouts you gave us, it talks about the values and goals of the athletic program, and up above the strategic objectives. To help keep us on the right course as far as the athletics, is it possible on a single sheet of paper you could give us the athletic department mission, your goals or strategic objectives and your values, just to help remind us what our mindset should be when we're trying to think?
Absolutely. And part of that actually is we annually, we reaffirm annually, normally in the late spring, our confirmation, I should say, I guess, of our obligations to the Ncaa and the Ncaa as far as compliance. Another part of that is, which is now in the ISSG, which as I was mentioning, it wasn't in the previous one, so that hasn't been indicated, but now it does say annually the board also will review and look at the mission and the goals of the athletics department and annually affirm that as well for the record. And so absolutely we're going to be doing that, and that's one of our action plans will show that we're going to have to implement that. Probably at the same time we'll read the affirmation of Ncaa compliance, and then we will at that point also affirm, you'll have it before then, so if you don't affirm it, we'll make sure we make the modifications according to that. So yeah, we absolutely, and I can get that to you sooner versus waiting till that moment. We'll get that to you soon.
All right, I'm trying to understand where you're at now, where you're going, and how, and Governor Anderson is trying to educate some of us that are less knowledgeable about
I get
athletics.
educated every time I go to a meeting, linebacker meeting.
But I want to know how you define success too. What, in your world, what is success?
Are you talking about success in which areas? And overall, it's.
And meeting your mission, or in relation to your mission, your goals, your objectives?
Well, I think when I'll show you the mission statement, which we have, it's on our website, it's posted on there. Our mission is to not just be successful athletically, it's also to be successful academically, it's also to be successful in the community and regarding them being good citizens when they're done. So how do we evaluate that? We evaluate ourselves on graduation rates. That's our academic success. We evaluate ourselves on how many student athletes are above a 3.0. They become all MIAA academic. We evaluate ourselves in win-loss records for our success, but that's also comparative based on how is that sport funded or compared to the other ones. So in certain sports, maybe it's fair to say, hey, I mean, if you're this successful sport-wise, then is that the same thing on, for another sport that's funded differently? So, but we have all that down. We do it as a matter of fact. My evaluation with President Speck would show all the different areas of how we evaluate our success. But I'll be happy to show you as well.
If you just, please, I can't speak for any of the other governors, but I can do pretty good on a one sheet deal.
This
When it
is
gets-
not.
This is very challenging to me to retain on.
I went through two highlighters going through it, but yeah, I actually do have that, and it may be small font, you may want to get some new glasses, but we can squeeze it in there onto one sheet for you. But we have a vision for 2020, we have our mission statement, and we also have, our goals, so I'll be happy to share all that with you.
Well, if a choice down a small font, I'd be happy to accept 2 pages.
So, and another thing when I talk about the community and them being good citizens, part of that is our community service, which I'll talk more about that tomorrow, but they're actively in the community many hours, and last year's 4,000 hours in the community, so.
Well, one of the things that the articles mention is that the board needs to be vigilant about athletics. One of the reasons is that you are many times the public face, the community face of the institution. And so if things are going sour in athletics, then that's how the community is going to view the university.
I had 2 questions. One, what does ISSG stand for?
Institutional Self-Study Guide.
So it's an accreditation kind of thing.
Right.
Almost comparable. Okay, secondly, and I'm glad you just said what you said, Dr. Buchanan, because the topic is board responsibilities for university athletics, and I think you've just educated us on athletics, but I haven't really heard because I guess I'm asking this because if I'm next, you said I'm next, and I want to get clarity. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is you want to get educated on athletics. I mean, board responsibilities, I mean, I guess you're saying you're not going to approve everybody's schedules, and you're not going to, and not going to get the referees or whatever. But so I got to do this with academic affairs, and I just wanted clarity on, because I'm kind of using this as my guide, and I'm lost.
Well, and I'll get with you, but I believe I've given you some things from AGB before on academic affairs, and they simply remind us of our fiduciary responsibilities campus-wide, and in terms of athletics, reminding us that, and let me back up and say, a lot of this on athletics triggered, of course, last summer with the Penn State debacle, and then some of these conference changes, and we're talking big business here, big money in some of these institutions. So that triggered the AGB to look at the Knight report and come up with some recommendations, just reminders for boards of governors about what our responsibilities are. And basically they boiled it down to that we have the ultimate responsibility for any athletic policies that are in place and how they are managed on this campus, that we need to uphold the integrity of the athletics program and its alignment with academics on campus. And that's one thing since I've been on board that I've been so impressed with by what everybody here does, is seeing these people as student athletes, not just our athletes. And the third then, that we have to increase our span of knowledge by educating ourselves about the role we have in intercollegiate athletics. That if we have a huge scandal, it's our scandal. It's not, you know, so that's what they're reminding us of,
Okay.
and saying that annually we should do that review. And that when new board members come on, that they should be educated about NCAA and what's, you know. And if I understand it, the NCAA compliance is sort of like the Higher Learning Commission.
Yeah.
A
Right.
similar kind of.
Right, the ISSG that's, you have, if you fail to do the report and make those adjustments over the time, there are sanctions that are applied to you.
Sanctions from the NCAA.
Yeah.
So that's what,
Okay, well, that helps, because I was just trying to, okay.
It seems to me that we need to always be vigilant. We saw what happened at Penn State, and we need to make sure that if there are things that come up, that they are addressed and not, covered up and so forth. We saw how damaging that was, and if hopefully we would never face a situation like that, but if something comes up that needs to be addressed, and a lot of it is attitude, that, you can have all the policies in place, but unless somebody feels like they can report something or go to the next level, then you have problems, so.
And I agree with that, as well as, I think the communication here is very solid. I mean, there seems to be, we have great flow on President's Council with information. The opportunity to give a report at the Board of Governors meeting is a big part of that. So, good or bad, we give the report. I mean, we've had some reports that are not great reports to have to give, but they're reports that we will be transparent about it. And the one thing where I can see, and as like I said, we'll know a lot more in June, but there's certainly some areas, and part of it I think is, as we get new board members, there is an NCAA compliance component of that we really need to enhance. If I had to speculate right now, that's going to be an area that'll say we need to probably do some sort of educational component, just explaining what is the NCAA compliance, how does it correlate, and really, you can't be expected to know the rules. I was in compliance for 12 years, and I don't know all the rules. Nobody had more violations than me just because you misinterpret the rules. It's a thick book written in legal language, and it's challenging on the spot to come up with those things. So, but in that process, who do you call? Really, that's what it is. Before you act, you should probably call somebody to make sure you don't jeopardize the student athlete, the program, the institutions. But I think that we'll get a lot more in a few more months, and I'm excited to give you that report and show you the direction that we should be going.
To Jared's credit, we've had a great administrative turmoil. I don't want to say turmoil in a negative sense in the last couple of years with the expansion of our conference. I mean, with all the sports it's connected with, it's just been how many teams now we're looking at? 16, 14?
Well, we've added 4 and lost 2.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
all within.
so I mean, and so you got scheduling situations as well. It's a.
and is, in all of these articles that we get from the American Governing Boards Association, there's always the warning to the Board of Education, or to the Board of Governors, that we not get into micromanaging athletics. So no, we won't be setting the schedules, determining who we're playing or which coaches need to come or go. But that we ask the hard questions, that we challenge the president, the athletic director, the academic people, that we ask those hard questions, because that is our responsibility to make sure that systems are working, but not to micromanage you. So, I don't want to coach.
Neither do I anymore. So.
Okay.
I have a couple comments about this.
Sure.
First of all, I think you really have to do some kind of audience segmentation in terms of athletic. We're not Division I. And a lot of this comes out of Division I province, because it's big business. These are the athletes that go on to be professionals. Academically, they may not be as sound, and there's all kinds of, that's a lot of times we have all this, because the money is so big there. We're not, we're Division II. Division II is very much, as you said, a student athlete. I always talk about the student-athlete, students first, athlete second, but they really have 2 jobs on this campus, because they, as Tom Rutledge would tell you, he gets his students out there in the morning real early, and every day they run. Sundays they're running. They go to his house and have pancakes. So they really have two jobs here. They've got to be students, be successful to stay in athletics, and they've got to be an athlete, and the coaches require a great deal of them. So, this is a really balancing thing for them. And every year, I'm asked to come, I think in the fall, when you have a retreat, and I think it's required for me to come, as a matter of fact, and I talk to the coaches about my expectations. And my expectations, I've said this every year, is that I want us to win, and I want us to be ethical in what we're doing. So I don't want you to go out and recruit students who are have problems, and then they come and bring those problems to campus. I mean, that's not what we're talking about winning. I don't want you to get somebody who's big and tall and strong who's going to go out and cause problems for us. So I don't go out and recruit for them. If they bring people on campus, I'm certainly willing to talk to the students. I've done that with certain students. The coach has gone to my office and talked to them. But the fact is, we established quite clearly that we want to be ethical in how we're doing this. And that's every year I said, I believe, isn't that correct? The same message.
Ethical, along with the Ncaa, follow the rules, regulations,
And the second part, I think, is that it's just what you're saying. The board has a managerial role up here. And so the board hires a president, and the president has a managerial role that's more day-to-day. And there are different management styles here, but the president then has to then look to his or her division heads to make sure that things are working in that division. And to the extent that they aren't, the president has a responsibility to say, things aren't working. And so how do we fix this? What's the problem? I mean, if there's a problem with the coach, then what do we do about going through a discipline process with that coach, just as you do with any employee? And that's really part of my responsibility, to make sure that I can deal with that at that kind of campus level. And frankly, nobody can keep up with it. I mean, any president who tries to micromanage a campus is simply spinning his or her wheels. You can't. And athletics is a great example of this, because frankly, they have rules over there that it's like the military. You can always get in trouble because there's a book over here that can always tell you get in trouble. That's the way I feel.
Always got something.
Yeah, that was good. And the classic example, I get these reports about our response to infractions. The classic example was our student athletes were out somewhere and they had to be back in class on Monday. They were in an airport on Saturday and they couldn't get, the flight was canceled, they couldn't get back. They got, I think they got something maybe early Monday or whatever, and this is an infraction because they didn't get back to campus in time to go to class. And there was no fault in it, but we had to report it. We had to report it because it's an infraction, and we had to find out if they would do something to us. And I get these reports. Okay, I look at them, I monitor them, and that one I kind of shook my head, but that's typical of the way it is. There are these rules, and that's why we have a person in charge of compliance. That's a full-time job, compliance. And we sometimes have compliance problems, but it's because there was miscommunication, and nothing has been so, since you've been here, since I've been here, we've not had any infractions that's been worthy of telling everybody in the world about it. It's been really kind of minor things, and it was a problem that we had a problem with communication. The coach did something, then we went back and fixed it, and so there is a whole process going on that you may not be aware of, but the fact is that process is there because of the Ncaa. And also we have rules in the MIAA. So we've got layers of rules in terms of athletics and what we have to do. And we do our best, I think, to make sure we're on top of that. And I think Jared is doing a very good job in managing athletics. And it's like Rod said, we've gone through huge changes in the MIAA, huge changes. And I voted against those by adding those schools, by the way. I really did, because my argument was, you're going to cost us more to have more schools because of the travel. And this was during a time we were economically stretched. And that argument just didn't, the other presidents, didn't matter, they're going to do it anyway. So then that's the nature of it. We're in a conference, and that conference, the presidents are in charge of that conference, and the presidents make the final decision. You can vote against it, but if you're outvoted, that's just the way it goes. So a lot of this is a matter of the integrity of the people who are in the places. And I think as you go back and look at Penn State, and Graham Spanier, who was the president, got in a lot of trouble because I think, first of all, from what I've read, he wasn't framing it correctly. He wasn't framing the problem correctly. And he was also, I think, maybe not wanting things to happen, and that was one of the issues at Penn State. Here's a storied program, and so they were trying to protect their image. And I think if you try to protect your image and not do what's ethical, then you're not protecting your image ultimately. That's what happened there. So my commitment to all of you is that we're going to continue, I'm going to continue to tell them about being ethical. We're going to continue to say, yes, we want you to win. Yes, we're going to try to fund you at the best level we can. Yes, we have student athletes. They're not athletes who are students. And those are the kind of principles that we run by. So if you ever have anything that happens that you feel something you hear about, let me know. Because sometimes there are things at this level that I find out about by people telling me. And then we address them. So, but we're willing to address those and willing to make sure that our athletic program stays clean.
Other comments? Dr. Speck had asked me if we might want to consider whether the board needs to have a committee. We have a budget audit committee that's kind of responsible for financial things. We have academic affairs committee. So I'm not really sure where athletics fits.
Well, I think it's a separate committee. There are some schools that have that. And again, if this is it's like academic affairs, if you want to have more information about it, or if you want to sit down and deliberate more about athletics, that's a way to do that, I think. I just would say practically, there aren't enough of you to have another committee.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you get staffed up, maybe you can do that, but I think the difficulty now is that, that would mean everybody be on yet another committee.
Incidentally, Tom texted me after he left, and he thought you were inviting him here to be a board of governor. So, just letting he texted me that, he asked for that, and I said, I thought I was being invited to be a board, so now we can go. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's typical Tom humor, by the way.
They didn't ask me what happened.
So a lot of empty chairs.
Well, that is something just for everyone to think about, but, meanwhile, I guess we have an ad hoc option anytime some issue regarding athletics comes up, that we can bring it directly to you and to Jared.
Absolutely.
So probably don't need another committee unless somebody just really thinks it would be a good addition to our bylaws. Okay, well, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. Wanted to quickly review the agenda for tomorrow. We have crammed a lot of things into the day because we're condensing a day and a half worth of retreat to a day. And part of the thought is that there will be several things that come up tomorrow that will probably trigger need for further committee action. So we won't get all of this completely dealt with tomorrow. We will convene again at 9 o'clock. There will be continental breakfast for anyone who is available to attend. Mr. Fullerton will update us on the NOAA Levitt's findings on enrollment and retention. And then Dr. Lapira will be bringing information about course redesign and the update on where we are on tenure documents. And then we will move across the hall for lunch. We do not adjourn, but we move across the hall for lunch, and we've asked Dr. Grosbeck to come and give a presentation on initiatives in the School of Business. Some of us have heard that. I was very excited to hear it the first time and thought the entire board and campus needed to hear it if they hadn't already. And anyone, all of this is totally open to anyone who wants to come, anyone who wants to hear Dr. Grosbeck's presentation. If you haven't made arrangements for lunch, would you please see Sharon Odom? She has a list of people who've indicated that they will be present for that part of the meeting. Right after lunch, we will reconvene with budget priorities discussions. I'm not sure that's a good combination, but sure. Lunch and budget. And then followed with discussion with representatives from the foundation and alumni boards about how we as a board and they as boards can do a more integrated job of some things. And then we will hear from some representatives of the new Standing Shared Governance Committee with Dr. Speck. And then each of the division heads will have a chance to talk about accomplishments and goals that perhaps we don't already know about. And then we will finish with something the board needs to do routinely, which is review of mission, discussion of where we see we're going, and questions and answers. So that is going to be a full day. And again, let me emphasize, open to anyone who has time to attend. So those of you who are here, we've tried to do a good job of getting that word out campus-wide, but those of you who are here, please pass the word to your colleagues.
And the attire is business.
Attire is business casual. Are there any other items for new business? Okay, future meeting dates are listed. We will meet next on April 19th, and then in May, that will be the first time we will move to the Thursday evening board meeting to accommodate the campus summer schedule. And I need to know, is 4 o'clock appropriate for everyone, manageable for everyone? Okay, so 4 o'clock on the 16th. And then just reminders again that commencement is coming. Hope everyone has a wonderful spring break, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning. So with that said, I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mr. Fleischaker moves that we adjourn for today.
Second.
Mr. Walters seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.